I sent you those couple of worksheets.
Okay. You sent it in an email, Kathy?
Yes.
Okay, I'll just have to wait till it comes. Thinking, Steve, do you want to get started? Because I know everyone's busy schedules and things, so, and I can continue to watch who's coming in, so.
Okay, perfect, great. Well, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Early for some, I know. Welcome to today's webinar on this gorgeous day, but then I'll take that away from you and say it's day 419 of our own self-imposed quarantine. Not that I'm counting or anything like that. Today, we're going to discuss signs for your business. First, we'd like to begin this meeting by acknowledging that we are on the traditional treaty territory of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation of the Mississauga Nation. May we respectfully share in the responsibility of the stewardship and environmental protection of these ancestral lands. Now, good signage can boost your business. It can differentiate you from the crowd and your competitors. But what should you look for in creating that perfect signage for your business? This webinar is going to provide some tips and tricks and help you develop great signage for your downtown storefront. I'm your moderator, Steve Key, for those who don't know me. I have my own sign, so it's not storefront, but it's right here in the office. I'm a local boutique communications company owner, and I'm chair of the Brooklyn Downtown Development Steering Committee. Our featured speaker today is Kathy Ellis, owner of Createful Studio. She's a Whitby resident, graduate with honors from the graphic design at the Durham College in 2000. You see, stop giving dates there, Kathy. Since then, she's had a really thriving career as a designer and creative manager. We had a chance to walk the downtown Whitby core. She's a people person who has a real keen eye for sort of design. And her approach is always about learning about a business and what you're trying to achieve and trying to create something that's going to make everyone happy. But she's really passionate about this topic. And I look forward to hearing more in her presentation. Also, Christy Kruss is on the call. She's the manager of Creative Communities. That's a great title, Creative Communities, because I think that's what we like to think here in Whitby. And she'll be able to provide you some information on potential grants and incentives, and maybe then also tell you what you can and can't do in our town. So thanks to both of you. I'd like to sort of start this off by doing a bit of a virtual roundtable so our panelist knows who's on the call. Yvonne, did you want to start?
Good morning. I'm a member of the Whitby Downtown Development Steering Committee, and I'm looking forward to learning today.
Great, thank you. Linda.
Yeah, I'm Linda Armstrong. I'm on the Brooklyn Downtown Steering Committee as well, and I'm on Heritage Whitby. I'm a Brooklyn resident.
Thank you, Linda. Erica?
Hi, my name is Erica Berryferg. I actually work for Avery Products Canada, and we're venturing into signage, different signage to offer to customers, consumers. So we're just listening in to see what tips you might have for us.
Great, thank you, and welcome, Erica. And finally on I see here, oh, Denise. Denise, come on board and say hello.
Good morning. Hi, so I'm a member of the Brooklyn Downtown Steering Committee and the Accessibility Advisory Committee, and I have an office space with a that's just opening with a big window. So I'm looking forward to learning all kinds of stuff.
Great, thank you, Denise. At this time, I want to turn it over to Kathy for a presentation and overview. We'll welcome questions and answers. There's a part on the bottom of this Zoom call where you can submit them, or just, we're a small group right now. We can just raise your hand and get in there. But Kathy, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Steve. I am passionate about this topic. I have been a graphic designer in Whitby for a long time, and I drive around this town doing my errands, and I see the signs, and I always think, oh, that's a really great sign, or, oh no, that one, oh, I wish they knew this, or I wish they knew that before they made their sign. So I'm really glad to have the opportunity to share some information and insight with you today. And I'm glad this is being recorded. I know there are a couple of people that want to see the recording later. So I'm going to start sharing my screen and get going. Here we are. That's me and my business. And today, Christy asked me to talk about effective sign design. Now that's different than saying what's a beautiful sign. So that's what we're going to be exploring today, is what makes a sign work for your business. It's not just an art project, it is a marketing project. This is your billboard, if you will. So I chose these examples for this particular page because they look similar, and yet they say something completely different. They're all black and white, but you can see that these businesses have really decided what message they want to present, just by using the building that they have and the signage, using different typefaces. And one of the things I really want to get across today is it doesn't have to cost a lot of money. You need more creativity than money when you are trying to make an impression on the street. And when we talk about design, it's not just art, as I say, it's also marketing and psychology, because you need to know what the art is saying, and you need to know what your message is in marketing. You need to know what your marketing message is. We use art and psychology to make the whole design of the sign. All has to work together. It's not just about what is pretty. And then when we're talking about your sign, it's part of your facade. You really can't look at the sign by itself. You need to look at the whole front of your building. And also your facade is part of your brand. You need to know what your brand is. We're going to talk about that a little bit. And the streetscape. You do have a responsibility to your neighbors and the town, if you will, just to make the most of your building and to make your building noticeable. You need to consider what else is going on the street. The elements of your facade are not just the sign, it's also the surface that you're dealing with. These examples are all brick, but of course there are lots of different surfaces that you can have. That's usually a given on your building. You might be looking at the windows. You need to include the windows as part of what you're presenting. It's not just nothing. You know, a couple of these examples have awnings as well. And you can see that they've actually made the windows part of the design of the facade. Whatever they're working with here, it's included. It's the big picture. It's not just the signage. Doors as well, of course. And lighting is something where there's really could be a lot of imagination used. A lot of buildings have architectural trim, and there's a lot you can do with paint. We need to be careful with paint, but also considering your sidewalk area, what's happening outside your building. So those are the things we're going to be talking about today, all the different elements. What else to consider in your facade? Obviously your brand, but I see a lot of signs where I think that a lot of thought hasn't been given to the brand. So I do think that's really important. If you have already decided on your brand and you know your brand really well, then that's great. But there's also a lot of thought about how to execute that on your facade. You really do need to think about it. And you can't really work against your architectural style. Whatever you're working with in your building, you really need to know what it is. Luckily in Whitby and Brooklyn, we have a lot of history, and it's interesting to play up the history of some of the buildings. I mean, it can have an interesting story, and that can be part of your appeal. You know, quite often you think about just putting a sign, big sign in the top of your building without considering the sight lines. And I see this a lot. So I think this is something that you really need to do. You need to stand outside your building. And where are the people? Where are the people looking at your store from? Where's the parking, for example? And what is the busy neighboring store? Like if there's a store, is it next door, the really, really busy store, or the business across the street, is that super busy? Make sure that, you know, people can see your business from where they are. And of course that means, you know, drivers, in particular, you know, which way the cars are coming and the cross streets and everything. You do need to think about it. You need to stand out there and you need to look at where are most people going to be seeing your store from. And what are the neighbors doing? Here, this is something I see quite often as well, is that people use the same colors as the neighboring store for their business and their signage. And quite often what happens then is that the two of you together look like one entity, and you don't want that. You want to be individual, and you want to be, you know, stand out on your own. So you really need to be careful. You do need to think about what the neighbors are doing. Because if you are, you know, even if your brand colors are the same, what if you're using blue and green and they're using blue and green? Different colors, but still blue and green. You know, you do need to think about how to differentiate yourself, and you need to use those colors differently on a different background or in a different way. Because if you end up looking like your neighbor, you've lost your individuality. And also the streetscape, is it you know, is it a street where people are walking? Is it, you know, a pedestrian avenue, or is it not? What's happening with the, you know, benches and the lighting on your street? Are you close to the street lighting or not? Very important considerations. And it's something that you need to look at night as well. I mean, don't avoid thinking about that. You know, you do need to make a couple of trips at night, even if your business isn't open at night. You need to know what it looks like at night and really think about what's happening on the street at night. And again, what are your customers, drivers, pedestrians, you know, where are they coming from? And accessibility, this is really important to consider how clients, you know, accessibility in a number of different ways, how clients are going to access your store, and also what considerations are there for signage for people with low vision, for example, or color blindness. You have to be very careful. There's a lot of different kinds of color blindness, and you need to consider the contrast in your signage. Understanding your brand is really, really important. And we're talking about signage. I just want to, you know, put this in some kind of context. Your signage is part of your facade design, but it all comes from your brand identity. So you do need to consider all of these things. If you have done these brand exercises, then you've already made these decisions about what makes your business unique, what your colors are, your typography, your style. You have a logo, you know, you've already decided what, you know, what your voice is and how you talk to your clients. But if you haven't, you really need to go back and do this step before you get to these other things. The expression of your brand is in the facade and your signage, yes, but it also has to be very consistent across all of these other things that you have for your business. And if you've decided this, what these are, then this is easier to do, obviously. And you're not always thinking, oh, I don't know what to do for a sign. Well, yes, your sign is going to be consistent with your facade, your store interior, your website, your social media, your business card. All of those things will be consistent, and it is much, much easier to make decisions, and you're not out to sea when it comes to making decisions about your sign, because you've done a lot of this thought already. When I first meet with clients, I usually go through this little 3-word exercise, which is very helpful when I'm working on any project, just to see where clients are with their business. This has particular implications for signage. You know, I ask clients to come up with 3 words to describe their business. Any 3 words. You know, I've put some examples here. I hope you can see them. And it's really interesting. Just among the words I have here, the descriptive words I have here on my worksheet, there are over 20,000 combinations of 3 words. So finding that uniqueness of your business is unique. It is. And you started your business for a reason. So when we can drill down and figure out what that is, you can tell me. And this is very important as far as signage and facade is concerned, because I have a couple of examples here. A daycare, a lawyer, or a yoga studio. You can imagine they're going to be entirely different businesses, completely different. And once we figure out, well, you know, what are their 3 words? It's much easier to come to some conclusions about what their signage should be and what the facade of their business should look like. It's going to be very, very different. So whereas you can talk about what is an attractive sign, again, going back to making an effective sign is really important. An effective sign is going to tell passersby that the lawyer is professional, responsive, and productive, and their whole facade is going to present that confidence in that business. And the same with the daycare. You know, it's going to be very different, obviously, looking than a lawyer, but you need to make those decisions consciously. And then you're presenting your business on your facade billboard. It's and different daycares are going to have different expressions as well. One that's clean, experienced, and educational might look a little different than one that focuses on play, for example. Okay, types of signs. There are a million types of signs, but I'm just going to talk about a few here, some common ones that we see in our area. There are also permanent signs, and there are temporary kinds of signs. Obviously, in my mind, you do need a permanent sign, but you could also have options of using temporary signs at times. So these ones are, this is a monument sign, this is a pylon. This, and this one is obviously a sidewalk sign, and these are these ground signs. And we see a lot of those around town. Lots of other kinds of signs with individual letters. This is me at my favorite Kim's convenience store. We see a lot of these light box type of signs around town, and I have to say they're not my favorite. I don't find them to be super effective. They have a tendency to look a little bit overbearing, and so not my favorite kind of sign. These are signs that have lighting behind them in this light box. I mean, it's a bit of a blank slate, but it can be a bit overbearing, and if you're not careful, it can be garish, which we don't want. These other signs with the individual letters are interesting. Some of these are lit. The Starbucks, for example, is lit from inside, channel lettering. And these other ones here would have some kind of external lighting on the building. But not to think that you're restricted to the surface of your building for signage. You can also use your window space. And this is really great. You can do something imaginative without filling it entirely with all kinds of words about what you've got inside your business. It can be very effective if you think about it carefully. I'll have some other examples a little bit later. You know, how much does a sign cost? Well, obviously it depends, but what does it depend on? It depends on obviously the type of sign, the size of it, the materials, the lighting, lots of different factors. But something I find that in our towns that is clearly not considered is the lifespan of your sign. It's going to get worn, and so that when you are deciding what kind of sign to get, you do need to factor in the replacement cost. How often are you going to replace it? I think that this is something that needs to be considered up front, which I think that some people don't do. Quite often see signs that should have been replaced 10 years ago and they're not. But then you have to think about, well, what are you saying? What are you saying to your potential clients when you're not looking after the exterior of your building? So you really want to, if that's not going to be something that you can do and you know yourself and you think, well, I am not going to do this every 5 years or even every 10 years, then you do need to consider this up front. Super important because as I say, the message to your clients is changing. If you're not looking after your business, now you're not going to look as professional. And if that's part of your brand, if that's what you want to do, if you need to look professional, then you need to look after your facade and your signage. Otherwise, you are sending an entirely different message on your billboard to the town. So be careful about replacing it when it needs to be. One of the factors that's going to influence that is exposure and the materials. These two things together need to be looked at in the very beginning. You know, a lot of our businesses on the main streets are south facing. They get a lot of sun because they're close to the street. There's not a lot of trees in our downtowns. Well, I mean, there are, but not enough to protect the businesses from sun exposure, for example. And I think that our town needs more awnings. I think that that can really help. But depending on the material and the exposure, yeah, the lifespan of your sign is going to be really different. So do take that into consideration. Size. What size should your sign be? Again, it depends. Sometimes a large sign can be super effective, and sometimes a small sign can be super effective. I would say that the factors most influencing what size your sign should be are your neighbors. You can imagine, look at this one on the right here, this Happy store. If all of the stores on that stretch, on that block were large, it would be really overbearing and it would be unpleasant, in fact, to be walking up and down the street if they were all really large. This one looks just fine. And this one over here looks just fine too when the lettering is very small. But it's going to depend what the neighbors are doing. So this is where you do need to consider not just what's happening in your own building. These two are very similar. The space that they have for their signage is similar, but what they need to do with their signage is super different. I will point out that one of the things, this butcher shop is able to have a really tiny, small lettering on their sign. One of the things that's super interesting about it is the pillar on the right. I mean, it does have some interest. It's actually part of their facade. It's creating some interest there. So whereas both of these look just fine, what's happening next door will be really, really critical. You can see the one on the left here, the really small one. If all of the businesses along that block had really tiny signs, you would think that was something, you would think that was weird. You know, what's wrong with it? It's not that interesting. But if they're different, and that's the key, then it's going to look like it's an interesting place to be. There's no advantage usually on a main drag like we're talking on in Whitby and Brooklyn. for all of the stores to kind of have like a cohesive look, like they look all like they're part of something. It's really, honestly, more interesting and looks more vibrant if the stores are different. But you don't want them to be jarringly different. You want them to be interesting on their own, but all together. It's a design project. It really needs to be considered. You want them to look interesting, like each one is interesting, so you will continue down the block and your eye takes it all in. So I'm going to talk about colors, and I often see the kind of default colors. People say, well, I want a green and a blue and red on my sign. And they end up with some kind of standardized color thing because they think that these are the colors on their computer that they have to choose from. And this makes me very unhappy when I see what be the default colors, because there's so much more out there, but people are stumped and they don't know how to make the decision. So I'm going to help. The best colors are your colors. Again, this is going back to your brand. You should know what your brand colors are. And if you haven't gone through that exercise, then it's very worthwhile to do, because you know, how you use your colors is where the variation comes from, but you should be using your colors for sure. I'm not going to talk in detail about this, but I want you to know that there's a lot going on with colors, and it's all about the psychology that goes into the art and the marketing. So again, we're trying to make your marketing message using art and psychology. So this is what design is. So you know about these, the color wheel. You know there is a color wheel. I won't go into it in great detail, but I will point out a couple of things at the bottom where it says combinations here. On the left-hand side, you can see this analogous color grouping where the colors are the fan-shaped colors with the purple and a couple of blues there at the bottom. When you use an analogous color scheme, it usually is calming. So because they're next to one another on the color wheel. So this is, when you think back to the messaging, this is something that our yoga studio might consider using analogous colors because it is calming. And this is a part of their message. They might want to present that. Whereas our daycare, for example, when they want to look fun, in the bottom right corner of the color wheel poster, you can see this color scheme that has 4 colors. You can see that it looks more playful. So that's the sort of thing that I would consider. You do need to consider the messages that are going out with your color choices in your brand. And also, if we look at the right here, you know there is psychology, and it's worthwhile when you're thinking about your signage, even if you know what your brand colors are, which colors are you using in your signage, and which colors are the main signage, and which is the background, what's your facade, and what's the contrast there. Again, I'm not going to go into this in any great detail because this information is available. You can talk to me about it. It does matter. Quite often, a blue is used in business. It's seen as a solid color, confidence inspiring. You know, a lot of businesses these days want to be green, and you see green in their presentation. I will say about green businesses, don't think that you only have to have green in your logo. I think it went that way. It's a bit trendy to be green, but that's maybe not the only thing you want to say about your business. So not to worry that it only has to be green. Orange is considered as a youthful color. You know, yellow you have to be careful with yellow because it can look a little bit cheap and cheerful. So you have to be careful if you're not trying to be, you know, if you're not trying to present that you're inexpensive, then be careful about using yellow. And there are other things about it. And you don't need to be restrictive and about the color, but the color combinations are really important. So I want you to be inspired. So, you know, there are lots of different color combinations that you just wouldn't call yellow. If we will look at this one on the left, it's not just yellow and green, for example. There's so many colors to think about. And I've just included these examples because I think that, you know, there's just a world of color combinations out there that are so interesting that I just don't see. I so often see that it's just not, and of course it's how you put the colors together, but you know, you're just not presenting your marketing message. This is not going to do it for you. So this is going to do it for you. You know, this, you know, when you are looking at these color combinations, and these could be your brands. You could have lots of different inspiration photos to take your colors, you know, from lots of different places. That's a job for a designer. Hello. But do think about just the world of millions and millions of colors and how interesting your building can look if you take these colors, for example, or these colors, or these colors. You know, this is going to be, even if this is not a standard color scheme, not using those default colors. So this is going to make your business interesting right off the bat and distinctive. And how you would use these in your signage and your facade is so much more interesting than the basic colors. There's just, I can't emphasize enough how important this is, and it can really distinguish your business from the neighbors. Briefly, a little bit about typefaces and fonts. And again, you may be familiar with the serif fonts that look this way on the left with the little picky bits on the end of each letter. And the sans serif fonts, which don't have those. The key is that they actually give different impressions. And again, this is going to go back to your brand and what you're trying to say with your storefront. If you are trying to look modern and up to date, you will want to use a sans serif probably somewhere. It's very important to know what you're saying with your typefaces and your fonts that you're using, because if you don't know, you might be giving the wrong message. Serif fonts are, as it says here, a little bit more classic, a little bit more if you are trying to suggest your history, for example, as part of your brand, that you would use a font with the serif. And it's just, it bears some consideration. So don't leave it to somebody else, you know, that doesn't know your brand. You know your brand, hopefully, and you can come to some conclusions about how you want it to look. Using the typefaces as well. You know, this is part of the psychology of it that you might not consider, but you know, a good designer knows these things, and you do need to consider what you're saying. You're saying a lot with your sign and your facade, so make sure it's the right message. And again, our daycare, our lawyer, and our yoga studio are going to choose different fonts, the typefaces entirely. So just knowing that people would choose them differently, don't leave it to chance. Make sure you know what you're saying with your choices in that regard. And of course, you can combine the fonts as well. Yeah, I've just talked about color. I'm not going to talk about all of these elements of design. These are the elements that we use in design to create balance, to create contrast and emphasis. We use these to create these. This is part of the psychology and the art of design. It's very important. Sometimes, depending on your brand, you might need a lot of contrast or not very much contrast. So this is a consideration that you need to discuss with your designer. I want to talk about some different kinds of letters. Lettering, 3D letters, I love them. I just love 3D letters. There's a couple of different things going on here. On the left, it's really interesting how they have used these pins behind the letters to give some distance from the surface for those letters. And you can see with the lighting that they've chosen, it's creating the shadow of the same word, which is super interesting. Trust, yeah, I think it's just great that the way they've used that. So there's trust in the background as well. Really psychology here. This one in the middle, you can see they've used these letters with lighting behind. Now, this is very tastefully done. Sometimes, I mean, it can be tricky to do, but this is very tastefully done. And you can see also, I'll point at the size of this sign, how they've used the white space around the signage to good effect. You can imagine that if this sign the letters were as big as the surface that they have, it wouldn't make as much of an impression. Whereas here, your focus is entirely on these words. Very effective. And they've used their black and white to advantage. They've got black windows and trim here. So smart to use white to contrast, because that makes now the window and the door part of the design. And they've got very simple lighting here. It's great. I super like the 3D letters on this one, this wild ink. And you can see they've got the lighting separate at the top with those three lights there. Super interesting. It's really well done. And again, they've used their space well. And the typography is really interesting for their business as well. Really great stuff there. Different kinds of lighting. Yeah, so many different ways of doing it. And some are more effective than others. I would have to say that the Lone Market sign here is of the kind that is not especially effective. It can look a little bit too bold sometimes, depending on what your brand is. But I will point out that the very similar things are going on here, but you can see that the design is influencing how effective it is. This one at the top here that I've highlighted, you can see that there's, I think, a little bit of lighting behind those letters, but there is lighting coming from above and below the signage as well as part of the framing here, I think. So that's really interesting how they've used texture as well to create the contrast that's needed to make their sign really legible. I really like this one here too. It's really simple, something a little different, and it's not overbearing. You can see the light is right on the front of these letters. It's the letters themselves, but it's not overbearing. It's not too much. And here, this is very subtle. As well. It looks really great. It's interesting how they have a vertical treatment as well. And this one here is really interesting, the way they've used the light. The light is behind this panel, this circular panel, and it looks like their logo is a cutout. So I just think it looks great. A lot of imagination. Again, I think that using imagination and creativity is going to give you a great sign more than money. You know, when you've decided on what your budget is, you know, talk to a creative person and see what you can do within that, because that's going to give you more value. Using your creativity and imagination is going to give you more value in your sign. More lighting. We have a lot of gooseneck around town, which looks nice. We might be reaching the saturation level on gooseneck lamps. So I do think that we maybe need to consider some alternatives. But you know, do you need lighting? I mean, this is an important question. Is your business open at night? I mean, lighting is usually for nighttime, but also for winter and cloudy days. So, I mean, that does need to be considered. And yes, you're lighting your signage usually, but you might also be wanting to light your windows or your product, depending on what your windows look like. Who knows what so you need to consider what's lighting, what you're lighting. and to be considerate. You know, don't just flash your light out everywhere. I've added a slide here on being considerate as in dark sky lighting. I want you to look at this one up here. Spreading your light all over is considered very bad. But it's like task lighting. Like, what do you need to light? Shine the light on what needs to be lit.
Kathy, just give me a bit of a time check. It's just 8:43. Yes. I know you want me to.
Okie dokie. Okie dokie. Thank you very much. Yeah, so I just want you to think that it's more effective and considerate, more effective to use light that's just lighting what you need to light and not creating a lot of light pollution everywhere. What to include on your sign? This is a question I get a lot. Yes, of course, your name and your logo if you have it. Probably not only one or the other. If you have a good logo that is not your name, use them both. Do you want to say law office? Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe you do. But don't forget to put your street number somewhere on your building. I think that's really important, and I don't always see that. I also see a lot of signs around town that include their phone number and their website, and I think that that's generally not necessary, and it's cluttering your sign. I think really all you need, you know, all those people are really doing is saying that they have a phone number and that they have a website, because nobody who's walking or driving by is actually writing it down. So yeah, don't worry about it. People already know that you have a phone number and that you have a website, and they will find you. So don't mess up your sign. Don't make your sign look crappy because you've included too much information and it's not going to be effective then. I just want to show some quick examples of imaginative signage. Particularly, I want to show this one in the middle where they're working with really a very dark building, but they've chosen to use a real contrasting color for their brand, the yellow gold. And you can see that there's very little actual signage going on here, but it's very, very effective because they've used their brand, they've used contrast. Look at this window vinyl is very small, but they've used it to great effect. And the same with the signage at the top, it's not that big. But they've used it to great effect. All right, I just want to show a couple of other examples of paint. Be very, very careful with paint. It can be super effective, but be very careful with it. And you're painting your building. This building, in the pink one, has a lot of architectural trim, easy to paint. These other ones, with painting the brick can be super effective as well. But be very careful. Look at this very, very old building. I don't think I would have painted that, although it looks really interesting. You have to be careful about the brick. You could be hurting the brick, and it could make your building disintegrate a little sooner. So be careful about that. I think this is really creative. This sort of mural thing is really fun. But the other thing about painting your building is, you could move, and your sign is still there on the paint. So be careful. We're looking at you, Marka. More imagination with paint, yay! Lots of fun stuff going on here. Again, these treatments are not super expensive, but again, using your imagination, talking to a creative person, hello. You never know if that is going to suit your brand and you want to stand out, you could do something really great. Window vinyl. Again, often I see this as a lost opportunity in our town. It doesn't have to be overbearing. It doesn't have to be full of words and full of people's faces that are 10 times larger than real life, and it can look really odd. But there's just a lot of super effective things that you can do with window vinyl, depending on what your brand is. And again, as I say, our town needs more awnings for sure. And I think that this is a really great way to add impact and differentiate your store from the neighbors. Using an awning, you can use a color, you've got stripes, you can put your logo on the awning or not. yeah, a super interesting way of making an impact. Also, one of the things that can help you make an impact in your business in the town is making our whole town, is contributing to making our whole town, Whitby and Brooklyn, more walkable, is using a projecting sign. This is helpful because it's perpendicular to your building, but it's helpful for people who are driving by, they can see, but it's also for walkers. So that if somebody's visiting a store up the block and they come out of the store, they're finished with that store and they're looking this way and that way, you know, where are they going to go next? If they don't know that you're down there, they're not going to go. But if you've got a projecting sign, they can say, oh, let's go down there to the other, you know, the other clothing store down the block. So I think that, I think Christy can tell us that these are recently approved by the town. So I do think that more stores should consider using a projecting sign. I think it increases the walkability of the town and adds to the community, business community for sure. Okay, so I think that's just the gist of what I wanted to present today. I know Christy wanted to talk next about the community improvement program.
Thanks, Kathy. Yeah, I can maybe pop in and then we can do some questions at the end if that works.
Okay, perfect.
So thank you for putting the slide up. So just a couple things to kind of play off of what Kathy said. As part of any sign installation at the town, we do require a sign permit, which is done through our building division. And it's basically similar to a building permit, but it's a sign permit. So I believe the cost of that is $210, but most sign companies will kind of work on that for you on your behalf. So they are very knowledgeable of our bylaws, as well as, you know, Kathy as a designer is also knowledgeable about, you know, the requirements of what is needed, because with any sign, you know, we have certain size requirements, certain height, it has to be attached to the building securely, all those types of things. And often a sign company will add that price into your invoice. And so they'll take care of that aspect for you, which is really, really helpful. So we do offer a few different types of programs as part of our Downtown Whitby and Downtown Brooklyn community improvement programs. So for facade grant, which is basically the outside or exterior of your building, we offer in Whitby up to $10,000 or 50% of the funds. And then in Brooklyn, we offer up to $5,000 or 50%. In Brooklyn, it's a little bit different. It's a bit of an older community improvement plan program. So we have the $5,000, that does include signage. So I don't think most signs are going to be $5,000 or sorry, say a $10,000 sign to get a $5,000 grant. So we often try and get people to take advantage of the full amount as much as possible. I would say generally, and Kathy may be able to speak to this, but again, it depends on the sign. But what I see coming in is, you know, maybe a couple $100, depending to up to a couple $1,000 is generally the cost of the types of signs that I see coming in my way. So that $5,000 can not only get you a sign, maybe you need lighting for your sign, some kind of exterior lighting, or you want to also do other work on your building. You can do that as part of it. And with our facade grant, we have a design grant. So 50% of your funds up to a maximum of $2,000 in Whitby, and then up to $1,500 in Brooklyn apply for that as well. So that's someone like Kathy as an urban designer, as a designer coming in, is able to kind of work with you, look at all these elements that she talked about today, and provide you kind of that advice and that information to help brand and work on elements of your building that will, you know, complement the streetscape and complement your business. So it's a really great program. It applies to other things in signage as well. It can apply to if you want to do landscaping of your building, if you need someone to do facade development, as well as signage. And then in Whitby specifically, we do have a separate sign grant. So it's 50% up to $2,000. And the design grant for that is up to, again, $2,000. We also have in Whitby, a interior heritage building grant up to 10,000. So that's converting space or adding additional office space. And the reason the two programs are a little bit different is Brooklyn, to be honest, hasn't really needed as much help as I would say downtown Whitby has. Things have organically been happening up in Brooklyn over the last 10, 15 years. So I would say that we haven't had as many applications in Brooklyn. I do encourage people to apply, and we're getting a couple actually already this year, which is great to see. In downtown Whitby, our council has put a little bit more energy into revitalizing our downtown Whitby area. So that's why some of the numbers are a little bit different. We upgraded that program 2 to 3 years ago. So there's been a pretty good uptake since then, but obviously we, still have funds available. So feel free to connect with me and let me know what your property is, and then we can kind of work from there to go over things. But I think that's the gist of the grant program. So maybe I'll throw it back to Steve and we can open up for questions if possible.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you both. Are there any questions from people online right now?
The awnings. I have a question about the awnings. Is that part of a sign grant program as well?
Yep, Yvonne, it's definitely part of the sign grant. One thing I didn't mention that Kathy spoke to a little bit, but those internally lit signs, kind of those box signs that you see, our council a couple years ago, we upgraded our sign bylaw in our downtown Whitby and downtown Brooklyn area. So if you have one, they're grandfathered in, but you would not get a sign grant for that type of work. We're trying to move away and look at more the historic character of our downtown and look at more complementary type signs. So awnings, for example, Nice Bistro in downtown Whitby, I think applied for the program a couple of years ago, and they use their awning in the summertime when they have a couple of tables that are sitting out there. So it's definitely part of the sign grant or facade grant. We can kind of take a look at it as part of your overall business redevelopment.
Yay, awnings.
I love awnings. If you look at old pictures of downtown Whitby, especially, there's so many awnings. It's kind of that typical old school, old style streetscape. So there's lots and lots of awnings that help shade the pedestrians. So it would be really quaint to bring some of that style back to our downtown, which would be neat. So. Well,
and it doesn't, as a designer, of course, I'll pitch in and say it doesn't have to, make your business look old fashioned. There are such new ones. Different styles, and you can have a contrasting color. There's so much you can put your logo on it. There's so much you can do with an awning, and it does, it adds character, and it projects your store frontage onto the street and all over the sidewalk. So it gives you more presence, which is what you want to do. You want to build that individuality. And I will say, Christy, about the historical photos, which I have looked at, one thing I really noticed about the awnings is they're super, super deep. Like they're like 10 feet deep, right? Because they especially the south-facing businesses, the sun just goes in there like crazy, and they really needed that depth. And they had things, but they were presenting things. Yay! Look at that! They were presenting things outside, right?
Show the awnings.
I love that. Yeah, you're so right. Look at that.
It's really quaint, and you can see lots of projecting signs, right?
Yes, right, because it's walkable.
Full circle a little bit, which is really nice. So
is that the 40s or the 50s? When would that?
I can't recall what era.
I'm looking at the cars.
Looking at the cars.
Say 50, early 50s.
30s.
No, look at that.
Oh no,
look
at this one in the back. Look at that. Yeah. Oh yeah, farther. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it may be the 40s. That's a wonderful picture. Any other questions from our group here today? I mean, Denise, you're putting forward a business. Did you get any ideas from this?
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. A lot of what you said, I felt like we're kind of on the right track, so that was good. But it's very interesting how much thought goes into this, because I really just asked the designer make something that fits the building. And I've never even thought about the typeface and stuff and how detailed you have to get, but it's very, gives me a lot of appreciation for what you do.
Yeah, it does, because you're saying something. So you want to be in control of what you're saying, right? And you want to make sure that your message matches what you've thought about for your business, and what is your you know, when you're looking at your social media and you're looking at your brochures or whatever, you know, you're really giving it a lot of thought, what your message is and how you're saying it. Your building is a giant you know, billboard for your business. You really need to consider that as well, because you're saying something.
I also loved where you highlighted the vinyl in the windows, because when I think of vinyl in the windows, I think of really ugly writing all over. And
that's what I wanted to show.
So beautiful, like the feathers in it. Like, I think that is so beautiful. So I'm going to be searching for some of that, I think.
Yeah, because it is talk to me. Yeah, it's a lost opportunity, and I think that if we can bring vinyl back somehow and do it right, it doesn't cost you any more. The vinyl is the vinyl. When they, you know, when the sign fabricator, the printer prints it out, is, you know, they don't care what you've got on it. It's going to cost the same amount. So put the thought into it and really say something unique about your business. You know, and put it all together. It's a great opportunity.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much. This was a really great presentation.
Linda,
thank you for coming.
Linda, did you have a question?
Yeah, just a couple. If someone is interested in a sign, maybe currently renovating or whatever, who do they contact?
Talk to me. You know, a lot of times people call the sign company first. And as I say, I've tried to put it into context. You know, the sign is part of your facade, and your facade is part of your brand. You know, so you do need to do that brand work and think about it, talk to a brand expert about that, and make sure that you know what you're trying to say, and you know what your colors are, so that you can be consistent across your website and, you know, your business card and your social media and your facade and your sign. It's all part of your brand. So do that work. That work needs to be done first, so that your execution on all these different projects can be consistent. And then you're reinforcing and your business, you know, making your business stronger by doing that work. So you know, I think that you should have your brand in place before you talk to a sign company. But of course, you know, I'm a designer. Yes, I can design your sign, but obviously you have to work with a fabricator as well. So that's always part of the, you know, having those good relationships with those sign fabricators is super important. And luckily we have a lot of really great ones in Whitby and Brooklyn. We've got, you know, good companies with a great track record and, you know, super installation, you know, really responsive. We've got those great people to work with, but I think there's work to be done before that call to that sign fabricator. And of course I talk to them. Yeah, all that brand work and thinking about the things that we talked about today is that needs to be done.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's good. One other question that's related, because with Brooklyn being the oldest part of Whitby there, with signage for a building coming in, this question would be for Christy. What is the sign standard supposed to be? There must be a bylaw, a restriction on the height of signs, size. I thought it was relative to the size of the building, but I don't really know. I'm really curious, that's all.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. We do have both a permanent sign bylaw as well as a temporary sign bylaw. So like I said, most sign companies should be familiar with our permanent sign bylaws, because they probably work with them quite a bit in various municipalities, and every municipality is different. In Brooklyn, as you know, Linda, it is a heritage conservation district. So any kind of signage does have to go get approved, get a heritage permit as part of the work. So we do take a look at that from, you know, the heritage side of thing to make sure it's not a backlit sign, for example, to make sure it is complementary to the historic character of the downtown. And so we do take a look at those things as part of any application, but there is size requirements. For example, if it's on the building, I think the first floor, it's 25% of the facade, the second floor, it's 15%. So, and then there's height, has to be so far off the sidewalk. Whole bunch of those things that our building division will take a look at, but there is requirements to make sure that our downtowns are not all just a whole bunch of signs either, because that's not very good, right? So you don't want too much signage because then it becomes cluttering. And I do see that sometimes a little bit with the temporary signs, not even in our downtowns, but in the community as a whole. You see a lot of temporary and flag signs that can become a little bit cluttery. So it's trying to manage. I think Kathy talked about that, you know, looking at the streetscape as a whole and seeing what works and how you can complement that. So
it's a balance, right? It's a balance. And this is where I think that it's important to consider the entire facade and not worry about, oh, the sign has to be this size. You need to know that information. You need to work within those parameters, but there is a lot you can do to make impact that's not about making a huge sign.
Oh, okay. Yeah, this was interesting because with the Heritage District, and you would know, Christy, I live on Way Street, so you know the new building right at the foot.
Oh yeah, that's
the one. The actually the Heritage Planner are actually negotiating with the basically you know, there's a name that's going to go on the building, so I believe it's going to be very complicated. So but it's interesting to learn of this. So thanks very much. That was really good info.
I know I'm trying to be conscious of time. Any other questions?
Nope, that's it for me.
Okay, great. Well, I want to give thanks again to Kathy and Christy for this information. Kathy, if someone needed to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to find you?
My business is Creativeful Studio, and let me can we share that again? Yep, that's my business, Creativeful Studio, and creativefulstudio.com, and you can email me there, Kathy.
And great. And Christy, if someone wants to go to the website, is there a specific place on the website they can go?
Yep. So for us, it's whitby.ca/CIP, and then it takes you to our incentive programs. And then I can probably reach out to me first and we can have a conversation. I can direct you to companies. We have a list of sign companies as well as designers like Kathy that I try and put people in contact with when they're starting those discussions. And then we can also direct you to our building division to get the building permits or sign permits rolling. But happy to have conversations and chat about what you're thinking about doing. So.
Well, wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for your time and attention today. On behalf of the town of Whitby and the Downtown Steering Committees working for you, hope you have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everybody, for coming.
Yeah, have a good day.